now we'll put out the flames as it happens. We have to get the schools open. We have to get everything open. A lot of people don't want to do that for political reasons, not for other reasons. But if we had listened to Joe Biden, hundreds of thousands of additional lives would have been lost. And if you look at the job he did on swine flu, I looked at a poll. They have polls on everything nowadays. And they got very bad marks on the job they did on the swine flu. H1N1. He calls it N1H1. H1N1. Got very poor marks from Gallup on the job they did on swine flu. And they stopped very early on testing. They totally stopped it. They just said stop. And frankly, if we didn't test, you wouldn't have all the headlines because we're showing cases. And we have just about the lowest mortality rate. But if we did, think of this, if we didn't do testing, instead of testing over 40 million people, if we did half the testing, we'd have half the cases. If we did another, you cut that in half, we'd have yet again half of that. But the headlines are always testing. Now, the testing is a good thing, but at the same time, it's fodder for the fake news to report cases. So we're doing 40 million plus, going to be very close to 45 million people. And when I turn on the news, I see cases, cases, cases. They don't talk about deaths being cut down to a level that actually tenfold they use. I got that from one of the very respected media outlets, tenfold, cut tenfold deaths, but they don't talk about that. They talk about cases, and the cases are created because of the fact that we do tremendous testing. We have the best testing in the world. We now make ventilators for the world. We had very few ventilators. There wasn't one person in any hospital anywhere in this country that needed a ventilator that didn't get it. And that was because we mobilized to a level, using the Purchasing Act in some cases, we mobilized to a level that nobody thought possible. Nothing.
Just for one day, I'd like to do a podcast episode that did not have to do with something stupid that Donald Trump said. Just for one day. That's all I ask. One singular day without Donald Trump tweeting something stupid, doing something in the Rose Garden that's stupid. Anything at this point. Hi, guys and gals and everyone in between. Welcome to the Voice of Liberty podcast. My name is Henry Conley. And as you just saw, today we're going to be breaking down Donald Trump's bizarre campaign-style speech in the Rose Garden yesterday. A campaign-style speech carried out on White House property, which is owned by the American taxpayer, in front of reporters in blistering heat. A campaign-style speech that was filled with inexplicable amounts of falsehoods. So let's dive right into this. Donald Trump opens the speech by saying that we are putting out flames. Now, of course, when Donald Trump talks about flames, he's talking about human lives that are dying due to COVID-19. He is talking about people he swore an oath to protect and defend, dying due to a virus that he failed to act on. Donald, lives are more than flames to be put out. These are people who you stood and swore an oath to defend, and you are failing them. He goes on to talk about schools opening and everything opening, political reasoning behind COVID-19. I got to talk here. He wants to talk about schools reopening. He's trying to say schools have to reopen. He's trying to put this narrative out there that schools have to reopen. And the reason he's putting the narrative out there is because if schools reopen and students start going back to school, everything seems like it's back to normal, even though it's not normal. Nothing's normal. The normal we knew is done. It's gone. It's dead. It's over. But Donald Trump, he thrives. His re-election hangs on the idea of everything going back to normal. Everything being reopened. everyone being able to go about their day, not worrying about the real and present danger of a virus. Students going back to schools, where the schools are like a prison. They have to stay in one room. They can't leave a room. They are surrounded and separated by plexiglass barriers. They have to eat their food in that singular room. Socialization's out the door. Lines painted in the hallways, separating them, keeping their distance. It's all just not normal. And then to try and jump on this idea of there being a political reasoning behind COVID-19, as if the Democrats worked with China to put together this virus that was going to plague the entire world. Somehow he thinks this is an argument, this is a statement, this is a fact, when it's just preposterous. To think that the Democrats worked with China to create a plague, to create a pandemic that has spread across the globe, is just a sign of how far he is slipping. Then to take a dig of saying N1H1, this dig at Biden, to try and appear that Biden just cannot talk, cannot equate a thought. And we know that he can't. But it makes Donald Trump, you notice how he said H1N1. He carefully made sure he said it properly to try and appear as though he is more coherent than Trump or Biden, even though he's just as incoherent and spells more words wrong than Biden more than likely does. In this bizarre speech, he continues on this claim that Obama and Biden stopped testing early on, as he calls for us to stop testing. He claims that Obama and Biden stopped testing for H1N1 very early on in the outbreak here in the United States, just as he himself is taking the reporting of new COVID cases from the CDC and moving them over to the HHS. He's working on doing exactly what he claims Obama and Biden did. But then we get into the craziest thing, the thing that Trump constantly says, that he just cannot seem to understand how stupid this makes him out to be. We have more cases because we test more. Donald Trump, to you, to your cult, to anybody who thinks we have more cases because we test more, the testing doesn't create new cases. It rather reveals existing cases. To say that we have more cases because we test more would be like saying we have more drunk driving related accidents because we report them. They don't disappear. They don't suddenly not happen just because we don't report them or test for them or watch out for them. They are always there. They are there. And the more we test, the more we reveal existing cases. This speech just is absolutely preposterous. And we continue on with him talking about very respected news sources. Of course, these news sources are ones like OANN and the occasional love-hate relationship he has with Fox News. These news sources who report data which strokes Trump's ego and makes him feel strong. See, Donald Trump, he knows what he's doing. I talked about this in the cult episode that I talked about, where he is making sure that his people, his cult, only go to the news sources that he supports, that the news sources that report the way he wants them to report. I say love-hate relationship with Fox because he's been increasingly growing tired of Fox, because Fox is even starting to report the accurate data, the accurate reporting. Of course, this makes Trump mad. So he talks about very respected news sources who say that he has cut death tenfold. These news sources link no honest research or statistic to prove that. They're just saying it. And in a typical campaign style speech by Donald Trump, he included pauses for applause where none were heard. Why? Because this was in the Rose Garden, in front of reporters and not his cult. Donald Trump stood in the Rose Garden on United States citizens' property and held a campaign-style speech at our expense, at the expense of the taxpayer. And this is where I get into what I wanted to really talk about quick here. The Hatch Act. If this was any other politician, if this was any other public servant, they would have violated the Hatch Act because of this. But for some reason, the Hatch Act excludes both the president and the vice president of the United States. The Hatch Act needs to be rewritten. Donald Trump's presidency has time and time again proven why the Hatch Act fails and why the Hatch Act needs to be fixed. There is a fundamental flaw with the Hatch Act. There is a fundamental issue with how it is handled and how it is implemented and how it is enforced. And that is that the president of the United States right now is showing how flawed it is and how much it needs to be updated. Yesterday, his daughter Ivanka stood in the White House with a can of black beans from Goya brand. And she said, if it's Goya, it's good. Thereby endorsing Goya brands with her title and thereby the position of power she holds. Of course, this will not be enforced also because the president of the United States controls who is enforced or who is criminalized under the Hatch Act, who is actually violating ethics within his cabinet. So to recap, I just got to say it again. To open this by saying we are putting out flames is the most callous thing the president of the United States could possibly do. To call over 136,000 people that have died due to his incompetence flames that are being put out is disgusting. And this continues the show why we need to be a voice of liberty against the president and ensure that this never occurs in the office of the presidency of the United States again. This is why we need to be a voice of liberty and ensure that whoever holds the office of the presidency next is held accountable for everything they do and say. So it's now that we need to stand up. We need to be a voice of liberty, and we need to awaken the voice of liberty, because 136,000 people are dead because we failed to do that sooner. We must never allow that to happen again. Be a voice of liberty. Awaken the voice of liberty.